Don't call anyone, please. If they find me, I'm already dead. Those were the first words she said to him. Not help me, not I'm hurt. Just a desperate plea not to be found from a girl who looked like she'd already given up on surviving the night. Logan Carter stood in that alley holding a stranger's broken body and made a decision that would unravel everything he thought he knew about his quiet, ordinary life. If you believe one act of kindness can change the world, subscribe to this channel, drop your city in the comments below, so I can see how far this story has traveled, and stay with me until the very end. This one will stay with you. The temperature in Billings, Montana had dropped to 11 below zero by the time Logan Carter's truck decided it was done for the night. It didn't sputter. It didn't give him warning. The engine just quit. 1 second he was driving down Route 9, headlights cutting through the dark like two pale fingers reaching into nothing, and the next second silence. Dead silence. The kind that feels physical, like something pressing down on your chest. He sat there for a moment, hands still on the wheel, staring at the dashboard like it owed him an explanation. It didn't give him one. He tried the ignition again. Nothing. Again. Nothing. A third time, just a hollow, clicking sound like the engine was laughing at him. Come on, Logan muttered. Come on, come on. Nothing. He leaned his head back against the headrest and closed his eyes for exactly 3 seconds. That was all he allowed himself. 3 seconds of frustration. 3 seconds of course, this is happening. Then he opened his eyes, grabbed his father's coat off the passenger seat, and pushed open the door into the cold. It hit him immediately, not gradually, not gently. The Montana winter didn't ease into you. It grabbed you. It took the air from your lungs and replaced it with something that felt like broken glass. His exhale turned to vapor before it even left his lips. He had maybe 4 miles to town. No phone signal. He'd lost that about 6 miles back, right around the same bend where the radio station had dissolved into static. No money. That wasn't new. His wallet had exactly $11 in it, and he'd been holding on to those like they were sacred because his mother's prescription refill was in 3 days, and he still hadn't figured out how he was going to cover it. No one expecting him. That one stung a little more than the cold. He started walking. Cranked him. Logan Carter was 34 years old, and he had the kind of face that made people trust him immediately, not because he was handsome, though he wasn't bad looking, but because his eyes had this quality of paying attention that most people lost somewhere around their 20s. He worked 3 jobs, early morning shifts at the grain elevator, afternoon handyman work whenever it came in, and 2 nights a week at a salvage yard outside town. He sent half of everything to his mother, kept the other half for groceries and gall, and told himself that next year was going to be different. Next year always sounded more promising from a distance. He'd been doing this particular version of his life for almost 4 years, ever since his father died and left behind nothing but a small house with a leaking roof, a truck that was now apparently deceased, in the coat. The coat. It was a serious piece of work. Heavy canvas exterior wool lining, dark brown with reinforced elbows. His father had worn it for 30 years, working outside in weather that would discourage most people from leaving their beds. It smelled like motor oil and wood smoke, and when Logan wore it, sometimes if he was tired enough, if the light was right, he could almost believe his father was somewhere nearby, just around the corner, about to say something gruff and practical and true. He pulled it tighter around himself as he walked and tried to think about something besides the cold. He got about 2 miles before he heard it. He almost didn't stop. That's the truth, and he'd carry it with him for a long time after the knowledge that he almost walked past. The sound was so small, so easy to explain away. A cat, maybe. Wind through a broken window. The kind of noise that a tired man walking alone at midnight files away under "not my problem" and keeps moving. But something made him slow down. He was behind the old hardware store on Milligan Street, and there was a narrow alley between the building and the next one, barely 4 feet wide, the kind of gap that collected shadows and old cardboard and things people didn't want to look at. And from somewhere inside that gap came the sound again. Not a cry, not a moan, something smaller than that. Something that sounded like the last small sound a person makes when they have already decided to stop fighting. Logan stopped walking. He stood on the sidewalk for a moment, his breath coming in rapid white clouds, listening. Silence. Then again, that sound, barely there. He turned into the alley. The girl was collapsed against the far wall, half propped against a dumpster like she tried to sit down and just kept going until the wall stopped her. She was blonde, young, 16, maybe 17. It was hard to tell in the dark. She was wearing a denim jacket, just a denim jacket, in 11 below zero Montana. No hat, no gloves. Her lips were the color of a winter sky right before snow, that particular shade of blue-gray that has no warmth in it at all. Her eyes were open. That was somehow the most disturbing thing. She was conscious enough to watch him approach, but she didn't move, didn't call out. Just watched him with those eyes that were working but not quite focused, the way someone looks when their body is beginning to make executive decisions without consulting the rest of them. Logan dropped to his knees in front of her. "Hey," he said. He kept his voice low and steady, the way you speak around something that might spook. "Hey, I see you. I'm right here. Can you hear me?" Her lips moved, barely. He leaned in closer. "Don't," she managed, a breath. "Don't call anyone." "Okay," he said immediately without thinking. "Okay, I won't call anyone. But I need you to talk to me. What's your name? Can you tell me your name?" A long pause. He watched her fight for it. "Chloe, Chloe." He said it back to her firmly, like confirming a fact. "Okay, Chloe, I'm Logan. I'm going to touch your hands now so I can check how cold you are, all right? Don't be scared." He took her hands in both of his. They were so cold it almost burned him. The kind of cold that lives in the bones, not just the skin. His stomach dropped. "How long have you been out here?" he asked. She blinked slowly. That was not a good sign. I don't know. Are you hurt anywhere besides the cold?" Something moved across her face. A flicker. Not pain exactly, something more complicated than pain. Something like a decision about how much truth was safe to share with a stranger. "My ankle," she finally said. "I fell." "Can you walk?" She tried to shift, and the sound she made, the way she cut it off like she'd learned that showing pain was dangerous, told him everything he needed to know. "No," she admitted. "I don't think so." Logan sat back on his heels and looked at her. He looked at the thin jacket. He looked at her hands that were already showing the early signs of frostbite. He looked at the temperature that was still dropping. He looked at his father's coat. "I need to ask you something," he said, "and I need you to be honest with me, even if it's hard. Are you in danger?" She didn't answer. "Chloe, are you hiding from someone?" The silence stretched out long enough to become its own kind of answer. They're not close right now," she said carefully. Each word was deliberate, like she was laying them down one at a time, checking each one before she committed to it. "They were earlier, but I ran and I think I lost them. But if someone calls the police," she stopped, swallowed. "Please, please don't call the police." "Why not the police?" Another long pause. "Because the people I'm hiding from." She looked at him for a moment with those barely focused eyes. "They have people everywhere, and I don't know who to trust." Logan was quiet for a moment. "You don't know me," he said. "Why are you trusting me?" Something shifted in her expression, something exhausted and honest, and just a little bit heartbreaking. "I'm not sure I am yet," she said, "but I'm out of options." Ahem. He made the decision before he fully understood he was making it. He shrugged off his father's coat. The cold hit him immediately, savage and immediate, like it had been waiting for exactly this. He wrapped the coat around her shoulders, tucking it close, and he felt her shudder under it, not from cold this time, but from the first hint of warmth, which sometimes hurts worse. "That's too warm for you to give away," she said. "I'll move fast," he said. "I walk fast anyway." "You're going to freeze." "I've been cold before." She looked at him, and for a moment her eyes came into sharper focus, really seeing him for the first time, not just registering a shape in the dark. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. Logan reached into his pocket, pulled out the $11. He looked at it for a second, 3 days, until his mother's prescription, then held it out to her. "There's a diner about a mile and a half west of here," he said. "May's place. It's open all night. You tell them you need to warm up, and you order something hot. They won't rush you. May's good people." He pressed the money into her hand. "Get there fast. Don't stop. If your ankle's bad, you find something to lean on. You find something to use as a cane, but you don't stop moving. You understand me? Movement is the only thing keeping you from shutting down right now." She stared at the money in her hand like she wasn't sure what it was. I can't take your... Yes, you can, he said. And you're going to. What about you? I'll figure it out. He stood up. I always figure it out. Logan? He looked back at her. She was holding his father's coat closed at the throat with one hand, the $11 in the other, and she looked despite everything. Despite the cold and the fear and the injury, she looked like she was trying to memorize his face. I'm going to pay you back, she said. I don't know how yet, but I will. You don't have to, he said. I know, she said. That's why I will. He nodded once, then he turned and started walking west toward the lights of town in nothing but a flannel shirt and the memory of warmth that was already fading fast. He made it to his buddy Dave Kowalski's place on the edge of town about 40 minutes later. Dave took one look at him, pale as a sheet, shaking lips starting to go strange colors, and pulled him inside without a single question that wasn't immediately practical. Hot shower, now, clothes in that closet. I'll make soup. I need to know, Logan started. Shower first. Dead men can't ask questions. He stood under hot water for 20 minutes until his hands stopped shaking and his thoughts started coming back in the right order. Then he wrapped himself in Dave's too big flannel robe and sat down at the kitchen table and tried to figure out what he'd just walked into. A girl, a teenage girl hiding in an alley in 11 below zero, terrified of being found, refusing police contact, wearing next to nothing, injured, and with eyes that held a kind of fear Logan had only seen once before in his mother's face years ago, right before she'd had to testify in court about a workplace accident that powerful people had tried to make disappear. That particular flavor of fear, the kind that knows the danger is real and organized and not interested in being reasonable. Dave set a bowl of soup in front of him and sat down across the table. You want to tell me why you look like you've seen something that's going to keep you up at night for a while? Logan wrapped both hands around the bowl. Yeah, he said. I think I do. He told Dave everything. Dave listened without interrupting, which was one of the things Logan valued most about him. The man had learned somewhere along the way that silence was sometimes the most respectful response. When Logan finished, Dave was quiet for a moment. You gave her your father's coat, Dave said. Yeah. Jim's coat. Yeah. Dave absorbed this. She make it, you think she got to Maze? I don't know, Logan said. And that was the thing that was already settling into his chest like a stone. I don't know. PM. He didn't sleep that night. He lay on Dave's couch and stared at the ceiling and ran through every possible version of how Chloe's night might have ended. In some versions, she made it to Maze and she was warming up right now, eating something hot, safe for the moment. In other versions, the ones he kept trying to push out, the ones that kept pushing back, she'd fallen somewhere between the alley and the diner, and by now the cold had done what cold does when it gets enough time alone with a person. By 3 a.m, the fever had started. He recognized it vaguely, the way the room started to feel tilted, the way his joints began to ache in a way that had nothing to do with the cold he'd walked through. His body, he realized distantly, had been running on adrenaline and stubbornness since the moment the truck died, and now that the immediate crisis was over, it was presenting him with the bill. By 4, he was shaking so hard Dave's couch was rattling. By 5, Dave had a thermometer in his face and a look on his that Logan recognized as genuine concern. 103, Dave said. Logan, I'm fine. You are objectively not fine. I just need to sleep. You need a doctor. I need to sleep, Logan repeated, and his voice came out rougher and more final than he intended. And Dave, who knew when to push and when to back off, backed off. Logan closed his eyes. The last thing he thought about before the fever pulled him under was not the cold, not his father's coat, not even his mother's prescription that he no longer had the money to fill. He thought about a girl with blue-gray lips looking up at him and saying, "That's why I will." He thought, "I hope you made it, Chloe. I hope you're warm." For 3 days, Logan Carter existed in the narrow, feverish space between sleeping and waking. Dave brought soup and water and medicine that Logan mostly didn't remember taking. Outside, the temperature climbed back up to a more survivable 15 above and then dropped again and then climbed the way Montana weather does, indifferent and cyclical and not particularly interested in human suffering. Logan dreamed about his father. In the dream, his father was wearing the coat. Of course he was, and standing at the end of a long road in winter light, and he was saying something that Logan couldn't quite make out. Logan kept walking toward him, but the road kept extending, and his father's voice kept blurring at the edges, and the coat kept catching the light in a way that seemed important but wasn't. He woke up on the third day with a clear head and a body that felt like it had been used as a punching bag, and the first thing he said was, "Did anyone find a girl?" Dave looked up from the coffee he was making. "What? The girl, Chloe. Did anyone? One was there? Any news?" Dave's expression did something complicated. "Logan, just tell me." Dave set down the coffee, came and sat in the chair across from the couch, folded his hands. "There's talk," he said carefully, "around town about a girl being taken to County General 3 nights ago. Hypothermia. They're saying she's stable, but..." He paused. "Logan, they're also saying there were some people asking around about her. Not police, not family, the kind of people that make other people look at their shoes and pretend they didn't hear the question." Logan sat up slowly. His head swam, but he pushed through it. "What kind of people?" Dave met his eyes. "The kind that ride motorcycles," he said. "A lot of motorcycles." Damn. Logan made it back to his own house by noon on the fourth day, walking the 3 miles from Dave's because he had no other option, moving slow and careful, like a man learning the rules of gravity all over again. He almost missed them. He was coming around the bend onto his street, head down against the wind, when he heard the sound, low and mechanical and somehow organized, not the scattered rumble of individual bikes, but a unified, controlled sound, the kind made by people who moved together on purpose. He looked up. They were parked in front of his house. All of them. 12 motorcycles in a line, military precise engines cut, but riders still seated, helmets off, now watching him approach with the particular stillness of people who have learned that stillness is power. Logan stopped walking. The man who dismounted from the center bike was large, not in a soft way. In the way that comes from decades of physical work, of carrying heavy things and surviving difficult weather and making hard decisions and living with the weight of them. He was somewhere in his 50s with close-cropped gray hair and a jaw that looked like it had been assembled from structural materials. He wore a cut the leather vest kind covered in patches over his jacket, and he moved across the distance between them with the kind of unhurried certainty that comes from a man who has never in his adult life had to hurry for anyone. In his hands, folded with a care that seemed almost ceremonial, was a heavy canvas coat with wool lining and reinforced elbows. Logan's father's coat. The man stopped about 6 feet away and looked at Logan with eyes that were assessing and careful, and carrying something behind them that Logan couldn't quite name, yet something that sat between grief and gratitude and something harder than either. "Are you Logan Carter?" he said. His voice was low and even and filled the space between them without effort. "Yeah," Logan said. His own voice sounded thin by comparison, but he kept it steady. "I am." The man nodded once slowly, like Logan had confirmed something he had already decided was true. "My name is Victor Reynolds," the man said. "People call me Grip." He held up the coat between them. "This belonged to the man who saved my daughter's life 4 days ago." He paused. "I've been looking for that man." Logan looked at the coat, at the man holding it, at the 11 other men still seated on their bikes, watching the conversation with expressions that were careful and still. He looked back at Victor Reynolds. "How is she?" he said. "Chloe, is she..." "Alive," Grip said, and something moved through his expression, deep and seismic, like a shift in something foundational. "Alive because of you." Logan let out a breath he hadn't known he was holding. "Good," he said. "Just that. Just good." Grip looked at him for a long moment. Then he took a step forward and held out the coat. "I believe this is yours," he said. Logan reached out and took it. The weight of it was familiar in his hands, 30 years of his father's life folded into canvas and wool. He held it for a moment without speaking. "You said she's alive," Logan said, "but you didn't say she's okay." Grip's jaw tightened, just slightly, just enough. "She lost part of her foot," he said, "to the frostbite. They tried to save all of it." He stopped. They couldn't save all of it. The words landed between them like something heavy and irrevocable. Logan closed his eyes for 1 second. "I'm sorry," he said. "Don't be," Grip said, and his voice had shifted into something rougher and more honest. "If you hadn't found her when you did..." He stopped again. The way men like him stop when they're confronted with something that bypasses all their defenses and goes straight to the part of them that's just a father. She asked about you. From the hospital. The first thing she said when she was coherent enough to say anything. He paused. She said, "Is the man from the alley okay?" Logan didn't say anything. Couldn't for a moment. "She had your money," Grip continued, "and your coat, and a description of you that, for the first time, something that might have been the distant ancestor of a smile crossed his face. "She's very precise, my daughter, very detail-oriented." The almost smile faded. "She gets that from her mother." "Mr. Reynolds, Grip. Grip." Logan shifted the coat in his hands. "I didn't do anything that any decent person wouldn't have done." "That's where you're wrong," Grip said quietly. "Because any decent person would have called 911, which would have gotten my daughter killed." He let that sit. "You did the one thing that actually kept her safe. You listened to what she asked for. You took her at her word." He looked at Logan with those assessing eyes. "You want to know how many adults in the world actually do that? Take a frightened 17-year-old girl at her word in a crisis." Logan had nothing to say to that. "We need to talk," Grip said. "There are things you need to know about who my daughter was hiding from, about why she was in that alley." He paused. "And about why, Mr. Carter, your name appeared on a ledger this morning that should concern you a great deal." The cold had come back, or maybe it had never left. Logan stood on his own street holding his father's coat, looking at a man whose daughter he'd saved 3 nights ago, while running a fever he hadn't known was coming, and felt a particular sensation of a world shifting underneath him, quiet and inexorable like a river changing course. "You'd better come inside," Logan said. Grip nodded. Behind him, without a word from anyone, all 11 riders dismounted at once. Inside Logan Carter's small drafty house, with the leaking roof over coffee that wasn't particularly good, but was hot, a conversation began that would take the rest of that winter to fully understand and the rest of their lives to fully survive. But that's the thing about moments like the one in the alley, about decisions made in the dark and the cold without any information about what comes next. You never know when you take off your coat and hand it to a stranger what you're really handing them, and you never know who's going to come looking for it. Victor Reynolds didn't sit down right away. He stood in Logan's kitchen holding his coffee mug in both hands and looked around the room the way a man does when he's reading a place, not the decoration, not the furniture, but the truth underneath all of it. The leaking roof, the mismatched chairs, the prescription bottle on the counter that was almost empty, the photograph on the refrigerator of a woman who had Logan's same eyes and looked like she was trying very hard to smile through something that hurt. Then he sat down. "Tell me about the night you found her," he said, "everything from the beginning." So Logan told him. He told it the same way he told Dave, straight and plain, no embellishment, no editorializing. The truck dying, the walk, the sound in the alley that he'd almost not stopped for. He watched Grip's face while he talked, and Grip's face did almost nothing, which Logan was beginning to understand was not coldness, but control, the kind of control that takes decades to build and costs something real to maintain. When Logan got to the part about the coat, Grip looked down at the mug. When Logan got to the part about the $11, something moved through Grip's jaw. Just once. Just a small tightening and release. When Logan finished, Grip was quiet for a long moment. "She was running from Corbin Slade's men," Grip said finally. Not a question. A statement delivered like a weight being set down on a table. "I didn't know that name until right now," Logan said. "No, you wouldn't." Grip turned the mug slowly in his hands. "Corbin Slade is a financial predator. That's the cleanest way to say it. He targets people in crisis medical debt, bankruptcy, foreclosure, and he buys that debt for pennies. Then he doesn't collect it. He holds it. He uses it." He paused. "He uses it the way a man uses a leash." Logan felt something cold move through him that had nothing to do with the temperature. "He had something on your family," Logan said. "He had something on Chloe's mother's family," Grip said. "My ex-wife, Elena, good woman, made the mistake of needing help when there was no one decent offering it. Slade was offering it." He set the mug down. 3 years ago, medical bills after her father's stroke. Slade's people approached her, seemed legitimate, seemed almost generous. The interest rate was, well, it wasn't what it appeared to be. "It never is." "No," Grip agreed. "It never is." Logan leaned forward. "And Chloe? Why was she the one running?" Grip's expression did something then that Logan wasn't expecting. It went from controlled to exposed in the space of half a second, and Logan glimpsed underneath the cut, in the reputation, in the silence, the thing that was actually driving all of this. Because Slade found out who her father is, Grip said, and he decided that was leverage of a different kind. The kitchen was very quiet. He was going to use her, Logan said. He was going to try, Grip said, and the quietness of his voice when he said it was somehow more frightening than if he'd shouted. She found out. She ran. She didn't call me because... He stopped. Because she was trying to protect me. 17 years old and she was trying to protect me. He picked up the mug again just to have something to hold. She gets that from her mother, too. Logan sat with that for a moment. You said my name appeared on a ledger, he said. Grip reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He set it on the table between them, but he kept 2 fingers on it for a moment, like he was giving Logan a last second before the information became irreversible. Then he slid it across. Logan unfolded it. It was a photocopy dense with numbers and names, the kind of document that looks bureaucratic and boring right up until the moment you find your own name in it. Logan scanned down the columns and his eyes found it on the third pass. Carter Margaret A. Medical debt. $142,000, account reference. Slade Financial Holdings, LLC. His mother's name, his mother's debt. He'd known about the medical bills. Of course he'd known. His mother had been sick 2 years ago, seriously sick, the kind of sick that required specialists and surgeries and extended hospital stays, and all the expensive, invisible machinery that American healthcare deploys when it finally decides to pay attention to a person. She'd come out the other side, thank God, but the debt had come out with her. Logan had spent 2 years trying to figure out the mathematics of it, the payment plans that didn't quite work, the insurance that covered less than promised the bills, that kept arriving in envelopes that he'd begun to recognize by their return addresses, the way you recognize the faces of people you owe money to. He hadn't known about Slade Financial Holdings. He hadn't known that the debt had been purchased, transferred, moved from the hospital system into something else, something that had a name on a ledger that also held the names of people who were being used. She has no idea, Logan said. His voice came out strange and flat. My mother. She has no idea who actually owns this. Almost none of them do, Grip said. That's the whole mechanism. It's not illegal technically, it's just predatory. He buys the debt legally through legitimate-looking entities, and then he waits. He doesn't send collectors. He doesn't file judgments right away. He waits until the person is deep enough, scared enough, isolated enough, that when he does make contact, the options seem very limited. And then Grip looked at him steadily, and then he presents them with an alternative to payment. Something small, something that seems manageable, a favor, a piece of information, access to something or someone. He paused. The first ask is always small enough that a person can tell themselves they're not really crossing a line. Logan set the paper down on the table. He looked at it for a moment, and then he looked up at Grip. How did my mother's debt get on the same ledger as your ex-wife's debt? He said. That, Grip said, is the right question. He reached into his jacket again and pulled out a second document. This one was thicker. Slade has been systematically acquiring medical debt in this county for 3 years. Targeting specifically, and this is the part that took us a while to establish, targeting people connected to individuals he's already identified as useful leverage. A mechanic who works for someone he wants access to. A teacher whose brother sits on a zoning board. A mother whose son... He stopped, looked at Logan directly. Whose son spends his off hours doing handyman work at the county courthouse. The silence that followed was the kind that has physical weight. Logan heard himself say very slowly, I've been doing work at the courthouse for 8 months. I know, Grip said. I have access to the maintenance records, the filing room, He stopped. He felt something cold and specific moving through his understanding. Not fear exactly. Something more precise than fear. The sensation of seeing the shape of something that had been invisible a moment ago. He doesn't know about Chloe yet. That I found her. Does he? Grip's expression shifted by about a millimeter, which Logan was learning to read as significant. He knows the coat was found, Grip said carefully. My people recovered it from where Chloe had. She'd had to leave it when they took her to the hospital. She was unconscious. She couldn't hold on to it. He paused. Slade's men found it before mine did. They traced the coat. It's distinctive. My people had to acquire it back. He said acquire with a particular neutrality. But in the process of tracing the coat, Slade's people started asking questions in this neighborhood about who the coat belonged to, about who might have been in that area that night. Logan felt the air change in the room. They're already asking about me, he said. Not by name yet, Grip said, but they will be. How long? Days, maybe less. Logan pushed back from the table, stood up. He walked to the window, not to look out of it, just to move because the information was too large to sit still with. My mother, he said, if they figure out I'm connected to Chloe, they'll use the debt, Grip said. Yes. They'll go after her. That's what he does. Logan turned around. His voice, when it came out, was quieter than he intended, and somehow steadier. So what do I do? Grip looked at him for a long moment. Then he stood up too, and when he was standing, he was a significant physical presence, not threatening, not in that moment, but solid in a way that felt structural, like a load-bearing wall. You let us help you, he said. Logan almost laughed. Not from humor, from the strange, specific absurdity of the moment. No offense, he said, but I just met you 40 minutes ago. That's fair, Grip said, strong. He didn't flinch from it. So let me tell you something about how we operate. We're not what you think we are. Or maybe we are some of what you think. But not all of it. He pulled out a chair and sat back down, and the gesture somehow made the whole thing feel less like a negotiation and more like a conversation between two people trying to figure out the same problem. We have lawyers, good ones, federal level. We've been building a case against Slade for 14 months. What we've been missing is a clean victim, someone with documented debt who has no prior contact with us, no reason to be connected to our organization, no way for Slade to argue that the testimony is compromised. He looked at Logan steadily. And then you handed your coat to my daughter. Logan stared at him. You want to use my mother's case, he said. I want to protect your mother, Grip said. And yes, with her permission and yours, I want to use her case as part of something larger. Something that ends this. He didn't look away. I understand if that's too much to ask. I understand if you want us to walk out that door and leave you to handle this alone. But I want you to know, he paused, and when he continued, his voice was different, quieter. The voice of a father, not a president. What you did in that alley, giving her your coat, giving her everything you had, without knowing who she was, without knowing if she'd make it. He stopped. That was the act of a man who still believes people are worth saving. And that is exactly the kind of man I don't want to see destroyed by Corbin Slade. The kitchen was very quiet. Outside, Logan could hear the wind. He could hear distantly the sound of 12 motorcycles waiting. I need to talk to my mother first, Logan said. Of course, Grip said. And I need to know if I say yes to this, if I let you bring your lawyers in, what does that look like for her safety right now, tonight, before any legal case gets built? Grip nodded, like he'd been waiting for exactly this question and was glad it had been asked. Tonight, 2 of my people will park on this street. They won't knock on your door. They won't interfere with anything. They'll just be there. He met Logan's eyes. Nobody touches your mother while I can prevent it. Logan looked at him. Really looked at him, the way he'd looked at the alley before he'd turned the corner, knowing that what was there was going to cost him something, but turning anyway. Okay, he said. Grip extended his hand. Logan shook it. The grip, and there Logan thought, was probably the origin of the name, was firm and deliberate, and said something without words about the kind of person who offered it. One more thing, Logan said before Grip could stand. Yeah. Chloe, when she's well enough, when it's safe, can I see her just to know she's okay? Not for anything else. Just, she already asked the same thing about you, Grip said. So yeah, I think we can arrange that. It shouldn't have mattered as much as it did. Logan had known the girl for maybe 10 minutes in the dark in a crisis. But it mattered. It mattered in the specific way that things matter when they happen in the kind of circumstances that strip everything down to the essential. When there's no performance, no social cushion, just 2 people trying to survive the same night with whatever decency they have left. Thank you, Logan said. Grip stood, put on his jacket, moved toward the door with that unhurried, load-bearing certainty. Then he stopped. Logan? Logan looked up. The coat, Grip said. That was your father's. Yeah. Grip was quiet for a moment. He would have done the same thing, he said. A man who raises a son, who gives his last coat and his last $11 to a stranger in the dark, that man knew something important about what it means to be alive. He paused. Hold on to it. He walked out. The door closed behind him. Logan stood in his kitchen for a long moment, holding his father's coat, listening to 12 engines start up in a single organized rumble, and then pull away from his street with that eerie, controlled precision. Then he picked up his phone and called his mother. She answered on the second ring, the way she always did, immediately, like she'd been waiting because she usually was. Logan, everything okay? He looked at the paper on his table. His mother's name, his mother's debt, a number with 6 digits attached to it that had been quietly transferred into the hands of a man who used it as a weapon. Mom, he said, I need to come see you tonight. There's something I need to tell you, and it's a lot. But I need you to hear it from me first before anything else happens. A pause, the kind his mother made when she was already adjusting herself to handle whatever was coming, because she'd been doing that her whole life. Come for dinner, she said. I'll make something hot. Logan grabbed his father's coat, put it on, walked out into the cold. His mother's name on Slade's ledger stayed with him the entire drive 3 miles in Dave's borrowed truck, because Dave had insisted, because Dave was the kind of man who insisted on the right things at the right moments without making a production of it. Margaret Carter was 61 years old and had the particular quality of women who have survived genuinely hard things without becoming hard themselves. She was warm and specific and direct in a way that people sometimes mistook for simplicity and always eventually recognized as strength. She had raised Logan alone from the time he was 9. She had worked 30 years in the same school cafeteria and known every child's name and remembered the ones who needed a second helping without being asked. She had sat through 2 years of specialist appointments, in surgery consults, in hospital stays, and insurance phone calls with a patience that Logan had watched and tried to understand and never quite achieved himself. She opened the door before he knocked. She looked at his face and said, "Sit down." He sat. He told her everything. Again, the full version, start to finish. He watched her face while he told it, and her face did what his father's face had never quite learned to do. It felt everything without being overcome by any of it. Surprise when he described finding Chloe. Fear quick and sharp when he got to the part about Slade. Then something harder and more settled when he got to the ledger. When he showed her the photocopy, she looked at it for a long time. I didn't know, she said, that it had been sold. I know. I've been making payments to, she stopped, looked up. Logan, the account I've been paying into, what if that money hasn't been going to the hospital? The question hit him like a physical thing. He hadn't gotten that far yet, hadn't followed that particular thread to its end. We need to find out, he said. That's my money, she said. And for the first time, her voice carried something that wasn't fear or grief. It was anger, clean and righteous, the kind that comes from a person who has worked hard their whole life and understands what it costs. I have been paying that debt for 2 years. If that money has been going somewhere, it shouldn't. Mom, she looked at him. That's exactly the kind of evidence the lawyers need, he said. She was quiet, processing. He watched her do it, the way she organized new information, filed it into the framework of what she already knew about the world, figured out where it fit. These people, she said, Reynolds, the motorcycle club. Yeah, they're going to help us. They want to, Logan said, if we let them. His mother looked at the photocopy for another moment. Then she folded it precisely along its original creases and set it on the table between them. A girl was going to die in an alley, she said, and my son stopped walking and went to help her. Yeah, and now her father wants to help us. Yeah, she nodded slowly. The nod of a woman who has been around long enough to know that the world doesn't often work this cleanly, and when it does, you don't argue with it. Call him, she said. Tell him yes. Tell him I want to meet with the lawyers as soon as possible. Logan felt something loosen in his chest that he hadn't known was coiled tight. You're not scared, he said. His mother looked at him with those eyes that were the same shape as his own. Of course I'm scared, she said, but I didn't raise you to stop walking because something in the dark might cost you. She reached across the table and put her hand over his. You got that from your father, you know. That thing you do walking toward the sound instead of away from it. Logan didn't say anything. Couldn't for a moment. Now eat something, his mother said. You look like you've been sick. I have been sick. I know, you sound like it. Eat. He ate. She sat across from him and drank her tea and didn't push for more than he'd already given because she'd always known better than anyone exactly how much space a person needed to process the shape of the thing that had just changed their life. Outside on the street, a single motorcycle sat parked at the curb, not running, just there. A man sitting on it in the cold patient and still watching the house. Logan saw it through the window when he finally stood up to leave, and something about it, the quiet, deliberate presence of it, the uncomplicated keeping of a promise, settled something in him that had been unsettled since the alley. Grip had said, "Nobody touches your mother while I can prevent it." And here in the cold was proof that he'd meant it. Logan drove back to his house in Dave's truck. He sat in the dark kitchen for a while, his father's coat on the back of the chair beside him, and tried to understand the architecture of the situation he was standing in. A predator who collected people's debts and used them as weapons. A teenager who'd run into a Montana winter rather than be used. A biker president who'd come to a stranger's kitchen with a coat and a piece of paper and something that looked in the particular light of that particular night a great deal like honor. And underneath all of it, the question he couldn't quite stop turning over: why his mother, out of everyone in this county? Why had Slade's system reached out and touched Margaret Carter's medical debt specifically? What was it exactly that made a handyman with courthouse access worth the trouble? He didn't have the answer yet, but he was starting to understand that the answer existed, that this wasn't random, that the thread connecting him to Chloe Reynolds in that alley was longer and older than either of them had known. And somewhere in a downtown building, in an office with good lighting, and the kind of furniture that announces money without apologizing for it, Corbin, Slade was looking at a piece of information, a coat, a name, a connection not yet fully drawn, and beginning in his careful and methodical way to pull the thread from his end. The race, Logan realized, had already started. He just hadn't known he was running. The lawyers arrived on a Thursday morning, and they didn't look like what Logan expected. He'd expected he wasn't sure what he'd expected. Something harder, maybe. Something that announced itself. But the two people who walked through his front door with Grip were a woman named Sandra Okafor, who was maybe 45, compact and precise, wearing a coat that was good quality without being showy, and a man named Dale Whitmore, who was somewhere in his 60s and had the kind of unhurried stillness that comes from someone who has spent decades in rooms where the wrong word costs everything. Sandra carried a briefcase. Dale carried a legal pad and a pen that looked like it had been used for a very long time. They sat at Logan's kitchen table, the same table where everything had started 3 days ago, and Sandra opened her briefcase and set out documents with the efficiency of someone who doesn't have time to make the same motion twice. "We're going to start with your mother's case," Sandra said. "Not because it's the most urgent piece legally, but because it's the cleanest entry point into Slade's acquisition pattern." She looked at Logan directly. "I need you to understand something before we go further. What we're building is not a single lawsuit. It's a pattern of conduct case. The individual components matter less than the architecture. Your mother is a tile in a mosaic. When we're done, the whole picture will be visible." "How many tiles are there?" Logan asked. Sandra and Dale exchanged a brief look. "Currently documented," Dale said in a voice that was slow and deliberate and somehow made every word feel load-bearing. 47 individuals in this county alone, all medical debt, all acquired through Slade Financial Holdings and 3 related LLCs, all people with some structural connection to local government courts, schools, or law enforcement. He paused. All people who could provide access to something Slade found useful without ever knowing that was why they'd been selected. The number sat in the room like something with mass. 47, Logan said. "That's just this county," Sandra said. "We have parallel documentation from 2 other states." Logan leaned back in his chair. He felt the information reorganizing itself inside him, not just his mother's situation anymore, not just Chloe's situation, but something much larger and more deliberate. A machine, an actual functioning patient machine that had been selecting and acquiring and waiting for years. "Tell me about the courthouse access," Logan said. "How specific is his interest in me?" Sandra pulled out a document. "Slade's company has been trying to get eyes inside the county clerk's office for about 18 months. There are property transfer records, debt filing records, certain court documents that aren't public, but aren't classified, the kind of paperwork that if someone with legitimate access could summarize them weekly would give Slade's operation a significant informational advantage in their acquisition timing." She looked at him. Your maintenance work gives you building access. More importantly, it gives you a reason to be in rooms where people don't think twice about your presence. He wants me to be his inside man, Logan said flatly. He wants to eventually ask you to be, Sandra said. He hasn't made contact yet because the approach is carefully staged. First the debt pressure, then the first ask. Small enough that you rationalize it, then the pattern is established. She closed the file. You interrupted the timeline when you found Chloe. How? Grip, who had been sitting quietly at the end of the table, spoke for the first time. Because Slade's people were following her that night. They were close. If she'd been found by his people before you found her, or if she'd been found by police who have 2 officers on his payroll, the situation with your mother's debt would have been presented to you very differently the following week. He paused. With Chloe as additional leverage. The room was very quiet. Logan understood then fully completely in the way that you understand something when all its pieces lock into place at once that the night in the alley had not been coincidence in the way he'd been thinking of it. Not random, not just terrible luck for Chloe landing in the same dark street as a broken-down man with a good coat. Slade had been maneuvering him for months. Chloe had run in the only direction available, and the 2 trajectories had collided in that alley in a way that had broken Slade's timeline wide open. He knows something went wrong, Logan said. He doesn't know exactly what yet, but he knows the sequence broke. Correct, Sandra said. So how long before he figures out the rest? Dale looked up from his legal pad. His people have been asking questions in your neighborhood for 6 days. Based on the pattern we've observed in previous targets, I'd estimate he'll have your name in association with Chloe within 72 hours, possibly less. And when he does, he'll move faster than you're comfortable with, Dale said. He'll make contact with your mother directly. The framing will be sympathetic, helpful even. He'll present himself as someone offering a solution, not a threat. That's always the first move. Logan stood up. He couldn't stay seated. He moved to the window, not to look out, just to have somewhere to put the energy that was building in his chest. She's 61 years old, he said. She's been paying that debt for 2 years. She's been scared of that number for 2 years, and she never told me how scared because she didn't want to put it on me. His voice was controlled, but just barely. If someone calls her and makes that fear feel like it has a solution, that's why we're here today, Sandra said firmly and without flinching. Because we're going to move first. Your mother is going to be unreachable for anything Slade-related within 48 hours, legally protected. And her payment history, 2 years of payments to what turns out to be an entity that misrepresented its ownership of the debt, that's not just evidence. That's a cause of action in itself. Logan turned around. She might get her money back. With interest, Sandra said, and damages. He sat back down. He put both hands flat on the table and took a breath and looked at the woman across from him who was talking about his mother's 2 years of fear as a legal instrument, and he felt something complex and not entirely comfortable. Gratitude and anger occupying the same space, the anger not at Sandra or at Grip or at any of the people in his kitchen, but at the years of quiet suffering that should never have happened, that a man in an expensive office had designed specifically to happen. What do you need from me? He said. Everything, Sandra said. Every bill, every payment record, every communication from Slade Financial Holdings or any of its associated entities. Every time your mother received a letter, a phone call, anything. We're going to reconstruct the full history of how this debt moved from the hospital to Slade's ledger, and we're going to document every payment she made after that transfer payment she made without knowledge that the ownership had changed. She clicked her pen. And then we're going to make an argument that will be very difficult to counter. How difficult? Dale allowed himself a small measured expression that wasn't quite a smile. In my experience, he said difficult enough that Slade will want to settle before it gets to discovery. And if he doesn't want to settle, then we make it more difficult, Dale said. That's what we do. They worked for 3 hours. Logan called his mother and she drove over with 2 years of files organized because Margaret Carter was always organized in a battered accordion folder that she'd been maintaining with the meticulous attention of someone who understood that paperwork was the only armor available to people without money. Sandra and Dale went through it with the focused intensity of people who knew exactly what they were looking for and found it in about 40 minutes. Right here, Sandra said. She held up a letter. Transfer of debt notification, standard boilerplate, buried in paragraph 4 of a 4-page document that accompanied a routine payment statement. She looked at Margaret. Did anyone explain to you what this was when you received it? Margaret looked at the letter. I thought it was just an administrative change. The account number changed, but the payment amount stayed the same. She paused. I called the number on the letter. Someone told me it was just a processing consolidation. Who did you speak with? I don't know. I didn't write it down. I should have. You did everything a reasonable person would do, Sandra said, and her voice was firm enough to stop the apology before it completed itself. You called, you confirmed, you kept paying. The deception was deliberate, and it was designed specifically to be indistinguishable from a legitimate administrative process. She set the letter down. That's actually helpful to us. That phone call, we can subpoena those records. Margaret looked at Logan. Logan looked at his mother, at the specific expression on her face, which was the expression of a woman who had been quietly carrying something alone for 2 years and had just been told that the weight was not hers to carry, had never been hers to carry, and that there were people in her kitchen who were about to help her put it down. She didn't cry. She wasn't that kind of woman. But her hands, Logan noticed, had stopped being tightly folded in her lap. They were open now, resting flat on the table, the smallest possible signal of something releasing. It was the moment that cost Logan the most, not anything that had happened in the cold, not the coat, not the fever, not the 12 motorcycles on his street. This moment, his mother's hands opening, he had to look away for a second. Grip at the end of the table was looking at the same thing. And when Logan glanced at him, Grip was looking back, and there was something in his expression that didn't need any words, the recognition of one person watching another person's parent in pain and knowing exactly how that particular weight feels. Then Sandra's phone rang. She looked at the screen. Something in her posture changed just slightly, the way a person shifts when information arrives that requires immediate reassessment. "Excuse me," she said. She stepped out of the kitchen. The room waited. Dale kept writing. Margaret refilled the coffee. Logan watched the doorway. Sandra came back in less than 2 minutes. She sat down. She looked at Grip first, then at Logan. "Slade made contact," she said. The table went still. "With who?" Logan said. "Your mother's listed physician," Sandra said. "He has someone inside County Medical's billing department. They accessed your mother's current contact information 40 minutes ago." She paused. "He's moving faster than we projected." "Because he's spooked," Grip said. Not alarmed. Certain. "He doesn't know exactly what we have, but he knows the sequence broke. He's compressing his timeline." "What does that mean for us?" Logan said. "It means we file today instead of Friday," Sandra said. She was already reaching for her briefcase. "Dale." "Already drafting," Dale said without looking up from the legal pad. Mom. Logan turned to his mother. "Your phone, starting right now, you don't answer any number you don't recognize. Any call about the medical debt, any call from anyone claiming to be from any kind of financial services company, you let it go to voicemail and you call me." Margaret looked at her son. "Logan, please." She reached out and covered his hand with hers. "Okay," she said, quietly, without argument. "Okay." And then Logan's phone rang. It was a number he didn't recognize. Montana area code, but not a number in his contacts. He looked at it for 1 ring, 2 rings, and then he looked at Sandra. Should I answer it? Sandra was already setting up a recorder app on her own phone. Answer it. Say as little as possible. Don't confirm or deny anything about any debt. If they make any kind of offer, your exact words are, "I'll need to speak with my attorney." Logan picked up. "Hello." The voice on the other end was professional, pleasant, the kind of voice that costs money to train. "Is this Logan Carter, or who's calling?" "My name is Michael Reeves. I'm calling from Slade Financial Holdings on behalf of a matter related to a Margaret Carter account. Am I speaking with a family member?" Logan felt the careful architecture of the call, the way it was designed to establish relationship and legitimacy before revealing anything that might cause the other person to hang up. He'd heard similar techniques in collection calls his mother had described, but this was sharper, more calibrated. "I'll need to speak with my attorney," Logan said. A brief pause, genuine not performed. The voice recalibrated. "Of course, we'd be happy to work through legal representatives. Could I ask, is there a specific concern we can address directly?" We have a number of flexible options for account resolution that we'd love to discuss before things become more formal. Attorney, Logan said again. That's the only response I have for you. Another pause. Longer this time. Understood, Mr. Carter. We'll be in touch. The call ended. Logan set his phone on the table. His hand was steady. He was mildly surprised by how steady it was. They know your name, Grip said. It wasn't a question. They know my name, Logan confirmed. They've already connected me to my mother's account. Sandra held up her phone. I got the number. We'll trace the call origin. She was already typing. But more importantly, the fact that they called you, not your mother, tells us something. They think I'm the pressure point, Logan said. They think you are easier to reach than she is, Sandra said, which means they've already assessed her and found her more resilient than useful. She almost smiled, which from everything I've seen this morning tracks. Margaret made a small sound that might have been satisfaction. The filing, Grip said to Sandra. Can we accelerate the protective order component? Already in there, Dale said. He tore the top sheet off his legal pad and slid it across to Sandra with the efficiency of two people who have worked together long enough that communication is mostly gesture. Harassment prevention, debt collection, violation, 3 federal statutes, and 1 state-level consumer protection clause. Sandra reviewed it, nodded. This is good. This is very good, Dale. I know, Dale said mildly. For the first time since the lawyers had arrived, Logan felt something in the situation shift from reactive to something else. Something that had a forward direction. They were no longer waiting for Slade to make the next move. They were making it. I need to tell you something, Grip said. He was looking at Logan with that steady, assessing look. Something I should have told you earlier and I didn't because I was still deciding whether it was relevant. He paused. Chloe wants to testify. The room went quiet in a different way than before. She's 17, Logan said. She knows that. She also knows what she witnessed. She was in Elena's house, her mother's house, the night Slade's representative made the first approach. She was 15. She heard the whole conversation. She remembers it. He paused. In detail. Can she, Logan looked at Sandra, can a minor testify in a civil case like this? With parental consent and certain protections, yes, Sandra said. But, she looked at Grip, this changes the risk profile significantly. If Chloe testifies, she becomes a direct target again. Not just incidentally, directly. I know, Grip said. She's already lost part of her foot, Logan said. The words came out harder than he intended. She's already paid a price for this. I know, Grip said again. And this time the quietness of it held everything, the knowledge of what his daughter had already endured and the knowledge of what she was willing to endure further, and the father's agony of standing between those two things without being able to choose for her. Does she understand what testifying would mean? Logan said. Does she understand that Slade would? She said, and I'm quoting her exactly. Grip's jaw tightened slightly. She said, he already took part of my foot. He doesn't get to take anything else. He paused. She's 17. She talks like that. Logan was quiet. He thought about a girl with blue-gray lips in a dark alley, asking him not to call anyone. He thought about the precision Sandra had described, the way Chloe remembered the conversation she'd overheard at 15 in detail. He thought about what it meant to be a 17-year-old who had spent 2 years watching a predator work his way through her family and deciding at some point in the dark that she was the one who was going to stop him. He thought about what his mother had said at dinner. You got that from your father, walking toward the sound instead of away from it. He wondered if Grip had said something similar to Chloe at some point about what she'd gotten from him. She should decide, Logan said finally. It's her call, not mine, not yours, not anyone else's. Her call. Grip looked at him for a moment. Yeah, he said. That's what I told her. She said yes before I finished the sentence. Dale finished writing something on a new sheet of the legal pad and set his pen down. We file this afternoon, he said. Federal District Court. The protective order request will go in simultaneously. We will have a response one way or another within 24 to 48 hours. He looked at Logan with those measured, steady eyes. Once we file, this becomes visible. Slade will know we have representation. He will know the approach failed. He will recalibrate. And, Logan said, and when a man like Slade recalibrates, Dale said very carefully, he doesn't retreat, he escalates. He picked up his pen again. I want you to be prepared for that. Logan looked at Grip, Grip was already looking at him. My people are prepared, Grip said. This isn't just your people's situation anymore, Logan said. No, Grip agreed, it isn't. Logan stood up from the table. He walked to the counter and picked up his father's coat, which had been hanging on the back of a chair all morning, present through all of it, the way objects sometimes are, when they have absorbed enough of a person's life to carry it forward. He held it for a moment, not putting it on. He's going to come after my mother, Logan said. That's what he does. That's the lever. He's going to try, Sandra said. Then we need to make sure that when he tries, Logan said, we're already 2 steps ahead of where he thinks we are. He looked at Grip. Grip looked back. Draft the filing, Grip said to Sandra and Dale. To Logan, I have a call to make. He stepped out of the kitchen. Through the wall, Logan could hear the low, unhurried cadence of Grip's voice, not words, just the rhythm of someone giving instructions, with the calm of a person who has made difficult decisions before and understands that panic is a resource leak you can't afford. Dale was writing. Sandra was typing. Logan's mother was sitting at the table with her coffee and her open hands, and that specific quality of stillness that belongs to women who have survived the kind of things that teach you the difference between crisis and catastrophe. You okay? Logan asked her. She looked up. I'm better than okay, she said. I'm angry. There's a difference. Yeah, he said. There is. Don't forget to eat something, she said. You still look sick. I had toast doesn't count. He almost laughed. He actually almost laughed, standing in his kitchen with 2 federal lawyers and the abstract threat of a man who had been maneuvering his family for 2 years. And he almost laughed because his mother was worried about whether he'd eaten. It was the most grounding thing that had happened all week. Grip came back in. He sat back down. He looked at the table and then at Logan. I just got word from County General, he said. The almost laugh died. Logan straightened. Chloe's been asking to leave the hospital for the last 2 days. Grip continued. The doctors want another week. She's been, he paused, persuasive apparently about her preferences. The corner of his mouth moved. She's ready to talk. To you specifically. She said, he stopped again. This time the pause was different. The kind a man takes when the words are not easy to say without something showing on his face. She said she wants to thank the person who was still walking toward her when everyone else in her life was moving away. The kitchen was very quiet. Logan set his father's coat back on the chair. When, he said, tomorrow morning, Grip said. If you're willing. I'm willing, Logan said. Outside on the street, Logan couldn't see the motorcycle from where he stood, but he knew it was there. He'd checked first thing this morning, and it had been there, different rider from last night, but same position, same stillness, same quiet demonstration of a promise being kept. He thought about a man who kept promises, about a girl who remembered everything, about his mother's hands opening on the table. He thought about Corbin Slade somewhere in this city recalibrating, deciding that the best response to resistance was pressure. More pressure faster, targeted at the weakest structural point. And he thought about what Dale had said quietly and without drama as a plain statement of fact. When a man like Slade recalibrates, he doesn't retreat. He escalates. The filing was going in this afternoon. The protective order was going in this afternoon. And tonight, Logan Carter was going to sit in his father's coat in his small house with the leaking roof and the prescription on the counter, and he was going to wait for the escalation that was coming. He was going to walk toward the sound. Because apparently that was what he did. Logan didn't sleep that night. He sat in his kitchen until almost 2 a.m, his father's coat across his lap like a blanket, listening to the house settle around him and running through every conversation from the day in the particular way his mind worked when it was trying to find the structural flaw in something, the loose board, the soft spot, the place where the weight wasn't being properly distributed. The filing had gone in at 4:17 that afternoon. Sandra had texted him the confirmation number with the same calm efficiency with which she did everything, and Dale had called 30 minutes later to confirm that the protective order request had been received and assigned to a judge, whose name Dale said with a very particular tone of professional satisfaction that Logan read as meaning they'd gotten lucky on the draw. Then the waiting had started. Waiting, Logan had learned in the past week, was its own kind of physical experience. It lived in the shoulders, in the jaw, in the way you kept checking your phone even when you knew there was nothing on it yet. His phone buzzed at 11:47, not Sandra, not Dale, not Grip, a text from a number he didn't recognize. 7 words back off or your mother loses everything. He stared at it for a long time. Then he forwarded it to Sandra, to Dale, and to Grip in that order, with one line of his own. It started. Grip responded in under a minute. 2 words, we know. Then 30 seconds later, a second text from Grip. Don't respond. Don't delete. Sleep if you can. Logan set the phone on the table. He looked at the text for another moment. Then he turned the phone face down and sat with his father's arm and tried to understand the psychology of a man who sent a threat at midnight, who chose that hour specifically, who understood that the dark amplified fear and isolated a person from the resources that made daylight manageable. Slade knew exactly what he was doing. He'd done it 47 times in this county alone. Logan thought about his mother asleep in her house, 3 miles away, with a motorcycle parked outside and a specific set of instructions from Sandra about what to do if anyone contacted her before morning. He thought about how she'd said goodnight to him when she'd left, the same way she always said goodnight, matter of fact and warm, like the entire day had been a slightly complicated Tuesday rather than the beginning of a war. He thought about what she'd said. I'm angry. There's a difference. He put the phone in his pocket. He closed his eyes. He did not exactly sleep, but he rested, which was the closest available option. At 7:15 in the morning, he drove Dave's borrowed truck to County General. Grip was already in the parking lot, leaning against his bike with a coffee he handed to Logan without preamble. How'd you sleep? Grip asked. Define sleep. Fair. Grip looked at him. She knows you're coming. She's been up since 5. The nurses they have opinions about that. Is she okay? She's Chloe, Grip said, which Logan was beginning to understand was a complete answer. They walked in together. The ward was quiet at that hour, the particular institutional quiet of a place that never fully sleeps, but has learned to modulate itself. Grip led without hesitation. He knew this hospital now, the specific geography of his daughter's recovery, the names of the nurses, and which ones would tell him the truth without softening it. Room 14 was at the end of the corridor. Grip stopped outside the door. I'll wait out here, he said. Logan looked at him. You sure? She asks to see you alone. Grip said it without any particular emotion, but Logan heard the thing underneath it, the father's specific discipline of not making his daughter's choices about himself. 5 minutes, then I'm coming in regardless. Logan nodded. He pushed open the door. She was sitting up in the hospital bed, which seemed important. She'd clearly insisted on it, the kind of small physical assertion that says, I am not diminished by this. She was 17 and she looked like she'd been through something serious, and she looked simultaneously more awake and more present than most people Logan had encountered in the past week of highly consequential conversations. Her blonde hair was pulled back. Her foot was bandaged in a way that was visible above the sheet, and she didn't try to hide it or angle herself away from it. She just let it be there. She looked at Logan when he came in, and her expression did something complicated. Recognition and relief and something else. Something that was working very hard not to become overwhelmed. You look better than the last time I saw you, she said. You too, Logan said. He meant it. Blue-gray lips and barely focused eyes had become this sharp and alive, and looking at him like she was reading him the same way her father did, checking for the essential truth underneath the surface detail. Sit down, she said. Please, it makes me nervous when people stand. He pulled the chair from the corner and sat close enough to talk without raising his voice. I wanted to say thank you, Chloe said. She said it directly, the way people say things when they've decided that this specific conversation is too important to approach indirectly. Not just for the coat or the money, for listening to me, for not calling 911. She paused. You had no reason to trust what I said. I was half frozen and not making a lot of sense, and you had every reason to just call for help the normal way and leave. You were making sense, Logan said. Maybe not full sentences, but the meaning was clear. Most people would have overridden that. Most people would have been wrong, Logan said. She looked at him for a moment. Dad says you're in this now because of me. I was already in it, Logan said. I just didn't know it. Slade had already found my mother before that night. All that night did was change the timeline. That's what he told me too. But she stopped. Something moved through her face, and for the first time she looked her age, not older, not harder, just 17, and carrying something heavy and honest about it. I still know that you didn't have to stop, that you almost didn't. Logan was very still. He hadn't told anyone that part. He'd told Dave. He hadn't told Grip. "How did you know that?" he said. "Because you stopped walking," she said simply. "You were already moving. You had already made the decision to keep going and not look. And then you stopped." She looked at him steadily. "I could hear you out there for a second before you turned the corner. Most people who almost stop and then stop, they do it because they decide they can't live with not stopping. Not because stopping is easy or obvious." She paused. "So thank you for not being able to live with it." Logan didn't say anything for a moment. The accuracy of it landed somewhere deep. "How are you?" he said finally. "Actually." She looked at her bandaged foot, back at him. "I'm going to walk differently," she said. "For the rest of my life, I'm going to walk differently. I'm still working out how I feel about that." She said it with an honesty that wasn't self-pity and wasn't false bravery either. Just the truth held plainly. "But I'm alive, and I'm angry, and Dad's lawyers are going to take Slade apart." She paused. "And I'm going to testify." "I heard," Logan said. "Are you going to tell me not to?" There was a challenge in it, not hostile, just ready. "No," Logan said. "It's your call." Something in her posture released, like she'd been braced for an argument she'd already prepared to win. "Good," she said, "because I would have done it anyway." A beat. "But it's nicer this way." Logan almost smiled. Almost. "Your father said you remembered everything, from when you were 15, the conversation at your mother's house. Word for word," she said. I remember conversations very precisely, always have. My teachers find it either impressive or unsettling depending on the teacher." She looked at him. "I remember every word Slade's man said that night. The specific phrases he used, the framing, the way he made it sound like generosity." Her voice stayed level, but something underneath it sharpened. He was very good at making it sound like generosity. "That's what Dale said," Logan said, "that the first approach always is." "Dale's right." She looked at her hands for a moment. "My mom cried afterward, not because she was scared. I mean, she was scared, but that's not why she cried. She cried because she'd been grateful. In the moment when the man was talking, she'd been genuinely grateful that someone was offering help." Chloe's jaw tightened slightly. "That's the part that made me the most angry. That he made her feel grateful for the beginning of something designed to destroy her." Logan thought about his mother's accordion folder. 2 years of careful payments. 2 years of being grateful for a payment plan that was a leash. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I know that feeling." His phone buzzed in his pocket. He ignored it. It buzzed again. He glanced at the screen. Sandra. "I need to take this," he said. "1 second. I'm sorry." "Take it," Chloe said immediately. He stepped to the door, held it half open. "Sandra." "Logan." Her voice was different. Not her normal precision, faster, tighter. "The judge responded to the protective order request this morning. Already Dale said 24 to 48. Slade's attorneys filed an emergency counter motion at 7 this morning," Sandra said. "They're arguing that the protective order request constitutes harassment of a legitimate financial services operation and requesting that the entire filing be dismissed on procedural grounds." A pause. "They have 3 attorneys on this. Federal level. They moved overnight." Logan felt his jaw tighten. "What does that mean for us?" "It means we have a hearing, 48 hours. Sandra's voice stayed controlled. "It also means they're scared. You don't pay 3 federal attorneys to file an emergency motion before 8 in the morning for something you are confident about. What do we need to do?" "Dale is already on it. But Logan, there's something else." She paused in a way that shifted his attention from high alert to something higher than that. "We pulled the call records from the number that texted you last night. The text originated from a burner, but the burner pinged 2 towers. One of them was a cell tower that also serves the county courthouse. The door was still half open. Logan pulled it closed. He turned away from the window in the door. "Someone in the courthouse sent me that threat," he said. "We don't know that definitively," Sandra said. "But the geographic overlap is Sandra." "Significant," she said. "Yes." "There are 2 officers on Slade's payroll," Logan said. He heard his own voice going flat and specific. "That's what Grip said. 2 officers." "We've been looking at that," Sandra said. "I can't give you names yet, but Logan, don't go to the courthouse today. Don't go anywhere near it until after the hearing." "I have a maintenance shift." Call in sick, Sandra said firmly. I'm not asking. He thought about the courthouse, about the maintenance access, about 8 months of legitimate, innocent, useful work in a building that Slade had apparently already decided was worth compromising. He thought about who he'd talked to in those 8 months, who'd seen him, who'd known his schedule. Okay, he said, I'll call in. He ended the call. He stood at the door for a moment, hand on the frame, running the new information through everything he already knew and watching the picture it made. Then he pushed back into the room. Chloe read his face immediately. What happened? Slade filed a counter motion this morning, Logan said. We have a hearing in 48 hours. She absorbed this without visible alarm. Is that bad? It means it's moving faster than planned, Logan said. But Sandra thinks it means he's rattled. He paused. There's also a possible source inside the courthouse. That landed differently. Chloe's eyes sharpened. How possible, she said. Possible enough that my lawyer told me not to go in today. Chloe was quiet for a moment. She was thinking he could see it, the same kind of quick structural thinking her father did, the ability to take new information and reorganize it into the framework of what was already known without losing the thread. The counter motion, she said. What grounds? Procedural. Harassment of a legitimate business. That's a delay tactic, she said. That's what Sandra thinks too. He needs time, Chloe said. If he's filing emergency motions at 7 in the morning, he needs time to do something before the hearing. Something that changes what you have. She looked at Logan directly. What's the strongest piece of evidence in your filing? Logan thought about it. My mother's payment history. 2 years of payments to an entity that misrepresented its ownership of the debt. Chloe shook her head slowly. That's strong, but it's documentation. He can argue misunderstanding on the transfer notification by time on the paperwork. She paused. The strongest piece is me. My testimony. What I heard when I was 15. Chloe, if he can discredit me before the hearing, she said, or intimidate me into withdrawing, then the pattern of conduct case loses its human foundation. It becomes a paperwork dispute instead of a story. She met his eyes. He's going to come after my credibility, or he's going to try to scare me out of it. Logan looked at her. 17 years old, bandaged foot, eyes that were doing rapid structural analysis of a threat aimed at her specifically, and arriving at the correct conclusion with the calm of someone who had been living inside this situation long enough to understand its grammar. I'm going to call your father, Logan said. He's already outside the door, Chloe said. He's been outside the door this whole time. Logan went to the door and opened it. Grip was exactly where he'd been standing, in the corridor, coffee, long finished, watching the door with the patient, total attention of a man who has learned that the most important things often happen behind closed doors, and the only thing you can do is be there when they open. Logan told him everything. Grip listened without interrupting. When Logan finished, Grip was quiet for exactly 3 seconds. He's going to contact Elena, Grip said. My ex-wife. If Chloe's testimony is the thread he goes through Elena. He pulled out his phone. She needs to be moved today. Not tomorrow, today. She'll resist, Chloe called from inside the room. She'd heard every word. She always resists. I know, Grip said. Into the phone, tell Elena I'm calling in 10 minutes. Tell her it's not a request. He hung up. To Logan, Sandra needs to know about the courthouse. Not just the cell tower ping. If there's a source inside, they may be able to access the filing before the hearing. Get to the clerk's records. I'll call her now. Already done, said a voice from the end of the corridor. They both turned. Dale Whitmore was walking toward them with his legal pad and his well-used pen and that unhurried certainty, and behind him was Sandra moving faster, and behind Sandra was a man Logan didn't recognize, younger, with a federal marshal's badge on his belt that caught the corridor light. Logan stared. Sandra reached them and said without preamble, the cell tower information wasn't the only thing. When we pulled the call records, we cross-referenced them with court access logs from last night. Someone badged into the courthouse at 11:20 p.m. using a maintenance access code. She looked at Logan. Your maintenance access code. The air went out of the corridor. Logan said, I was home at 11:20. We know, Sandra said. Your phone pinged your home tower. You didn't badge in. She paused. Someone else used your code. Grip said very quietly, they cloned his access. The implication, Dale said, arriving alongside Sandra and settling into his usual measured cadence, is that Slade's asset inside the courthouse accessed your maintenance credentials, possibly to plant something, possibly to pull something, possibly to set up a situation that if this had gone differently could have been used to implicate you. Logan felt the full architecture of it assemble in his understanding all at once. Not just the debt, not just his mother. The plan had been layered: use the debt to create pressure, use the courthouse access to create leverage, and if Logan resisted or became inconvenient, use his own access code to create a crime that had his name on it. He'd been the subject of a plan he hadn't known existed, and the plan had been in motion for 8 months. The man with the marshal's badge stepped forward. "Mr. Carter, I'm Deputy Marshal Ray Connors. I've been coordinating with Miss Okafor for the last 6 hours." He had the kind of direct, unhurried manner that Logan associated with people who understood that their presence was already significant and didn't need to amplify it. "We're treating the unauthorized use of your courthouse credentials as a federal matter. That changes the hearing dynamic considerably." "How?" Logan said. "Because a civil case becomes something else when there's evidence of identity fraud and potential obstruction connected to a federal court filing," Sandra said. Slade's emergency counter motion just became a liability for him instead of a tool. Chloe's voice came from inside the room. "Are you going to tell me what's happening, or do I have to come out there?" Grip looked at the doorway. "You stay in the bed." That was not an answer. "You stay in the bed," Grip repeated, and there was something in his voice that was half exasperation and half the specific helpless pride of a father watching his child be exactly, precisely, inconveniently themselves. He walked into the room. Logan heard him quietly and efficiently telling Chloe what had just been established in the hallway. He heard Chloe say nothing for a moment. Then he heard her say, "So they were setting him up." "Yes," Grip said, "and now they're caught setting him up." "Yes," a pause. "Good," Chloe said. "That was stupid of them. You don't frame someone who's already connected to federal lawyers." "No," Grip agreed, "you don't." In the corridor, Logan looked at Sandra, at Dale, at the deputy marshal. "The hearing," he said, 48 hours, "is no longer just about your mother's debt," Sandra said. "We now have identity fraud, unauthorized courthouse access, potential obstruction, and a pattern of conduct that has federal implications." She looked at him steadily. "Slade came at you with 3 lawyers this morning. We're going to walk into that hearing with a federal marshal and a 17-year-old witness who remembers every word she's ever heard, and we're going to show a judge the full picture." Logan stood in that hospital corridor with his father's coat over his arm and the phone in his pocket that still had a threatening text on it, and the knowledge of what 8 months of invisible maneuvering looked like when it finally got exposed to light. And he felt not relief, not victory, because neither of those was appropriate yet, but something clarifying. The particular sensation of a problem that has been shapeless and ambient, becoming specific and bounded, and therefore solvable. "What do I do right now?" he said. "Specifically, right now." "Right now," Sandra said, "you go home. You do not contact anyone related to the courthouse. You do not go near Slade's offices or any property associated with him. You let us handle the next 48 hours. She paused. "And you answer your phone when I call." "That's it." "That's everything," she said. "You've already done the hard part." Logan looked at her. "I gave a girl a coat." "You gave a girl a coat," Sandra confirmed, "and that coat pulled a thread that unraveled 8 months of careful architecture." She almost smiled. "You'd be surprised how often that's how it works." Grip came back out of the room. He stood next to Logan for a moment, both of them looking at the door to room 14, behind which a 17-year-old girl was presumably reorganizing new information with the same focused efficiency she applied to everything. "She's going to be fine," Grip said. It wasn't reassurance. It was assessment. "I know," Logan said. "The hearing." Grip looked at him. "I want you there." "I'll be there." "You don't have to be. You're not testifying. You don't have a legal role in the—" "I'll be there," Logan said again. And there was enough finality in it that Grip didn't push. He drove back to his house in Dave's borrowed truck, and the drive took 12 minutes. And in those 12 minutes, Logan Carter replayed the full sequence of the past week, from the moment his truck died on Route 9 to the moment he'd stood in a hospital corridor and watched a federal case assemble itself around a coat and a text, and 2 years of his mother's careful payments into a leash she hadn't known was a leash. He pulled up to his house. The motorcycle was still there. Different rider again. Third one he'd counted, which meant Grip was rotating them deliberately, making sure they were always alert and never expected. He got out. He looked at the rider. The rider gave him a single nod. Logan nodded back. He went inside. He sat at his kitchen table. He put his father's coat on the back of the chair. He looked at the prescription bottle on the counter, still almost an empty, still 3 days until his mother's refill, still the same $11 problem that had been there the night the truck died, and the night had changed everything. He picked up his phone and called Dave. "Hey," Dave said. "Hey." Logan leaned back in the chair. "How are you doing?" A pause. "You're asking me how I'm doing?" "Yeah. You're in the middle of a federal situation involving a biker president and a predatory financial operation, and you're asking me how I'm doing?" "Yeah." Dave laughed, a real one, short and genuine. "I'm fine, Logan. I'm perfectly fine." A pause. Logan thought about it, really thought about it the way the question deserved. "I think," he said slowly, "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." "Yeah," Dave said, "I think so too." Outside on the street, the motorcycle stayed exactly where it was, patient and still, and keeping its promise in the cold. The 48 hours before the hearing were the longest Logan had spent since his father's last week in the hospital. He didn't go to the courthouse. He didn't go anywhere near Slade's part of town. He answered Sandra's calls on the first ring, and Dave's calls on the second, and his mother's calls immediately, always without exception, because every time her name appeared on his screen, he felt the specific anxiety of a person who understands that the people they love are standing inside a situation that was designed to hurt them. Margaret Carter, for her part, was handling it the way she handled everything, with a focused practicality that made Logan feel simultaneously profound admiration and the particular helpless love of a child watching a parent be stronger than they should have to be. She called him on the second morning, 6 hours before the hearing, and her first words were, "I found 3 more letters." Logan sat up straight. "What kind of letters?" "From Slade Financial, from before the transfer notification. I found them in the folder I keep in the bedroom closet, not the main folder, the backup one." Her voice was steady and precise. "Logan, they were sending me correspondence for almost 4 months before they formally notified me of the transfer, introducing themselves, asking about my payment comfort level, checking in on the account." A pause. "They were building familiarity before I even knew they owned the debt." "Send them to Sandra right now," Logan said. "Right now, Mom, before anything else." "Already photographed," she said. "I'm sending them as we speak." He heard the notification sound of a message sending. "How did they get your contact information before the formal transfer?" Logan said. "That," his mother said, "is exactly the question I'd like someone to answer under oath." Sandra called 4 minutes later. Logan could hear in her voice the particular energy of a lawyer who has just received something that changes the shape of what she's about to walk into a courtroom with. "These letters establish pre-transfer contact," Sandra said rapidly, "which means Slade's organization was operating on this account before they had legal ownership. That's not a gray area. That is a clear violation of federal debt collection law, and it predates everything else we've documented." She paused for half a second. "Your mother just handed us the foundation we needed." "How does this change the hearing?" "It doesn't just support our position," Sandra said. "It dismantles his countermotion entirely. He filed this morning arguing that our filing was procedurally improper harassment of a legitimate business. These letters establish that his business was operating improperly before any of our filing existed." A beat. "We're not on defense anymore." Logan felt something shift in his chest. The sensation of momentum, real directional momentum, that had been building since the moment Grip had walked away from his kitchen table and said, "I have a call to make." "I'll be at the courthouse at 8, Logan said. 8:30 or so, Sandra corrected. "Hearing's at 9. And Logan wears something that says you're a person who takes this seriously without trying too hard. He almost smiled. "What does that mean?" "It means not the flannel," she said, "but also not a tie." He wore his father's coat, not because it was strategic, not because it said anything in particular to anyone who didn't know its history, but because it was the coat that had started all of this, and bringing it into the room, where all of this was going to be resolved, felt like the right kind of symmetry, the kind that didn't need to be explained. He got to the courthouse at 8:22. Sandra and Dale were already in the lobby, and Dale had his legal pad, and Sandra had the three-letter file in a separate folder on top of her briefcase, where it would be immediately accessible, and both of them had the focused stillness of people standing at the beginning of something they've prepared for and are ready to meet. Grip arrived at 8:28 with two of his men who stayed in the lobby while Grip came forward. He was wearing a jacket instead of his cut the only time Logan had seen him without it, and the absence of it made him look not smaller but different, more like a father and less like a president. Logan suspected that was intentional. "Elena," Logan said. "Safe," Grip said. "Moved 2 days ago. Slade's people went to her house yesterday afternoon, found it empty." Something moved through his expression. I wish I could have seen his face when they reported back. "Chloe, still at County General officially," Grip said. "Unofficially, she's been moved to a secured location since yesterday morning. Hospital is maintaining her room assignment for misdirection." He looked at Logan steadily. "She wanted to be here today. I told her no." "How'd she take that?" "About as well as you'd expect." A pause. "She made me promise to record the whole thing on my phone." "Did you promise?" "I promised Dale would take detailed notes," Grip said. Which is true." Dale, without looking up from his legal pad, said extremely detailed. At 8:55, they walked into the courtroom. Slade's legal team was already seated 3 attorneys, as Sandra had said, all of them expensive, in the specific way that announces itself through the quality of materials and the economy of movement, people who have never had to rush because their resources have always made rushing unnecessary. The lead attorney was a woman named Christine Hale, and Logan recognized the name because Sandra had spent 20 minutes the previous evening briefing him on who she was, federal civil litigation, 18 years of record that was genuinely impressive, and a methodology that Sandra described as aggressive procedural maneuvering, combined with an ability to make complexity look like chaos until the moment she wanted clarity. Christine Hale looked at Sandra across the courtroom and gave her the specific nod of two professionals who respect each other and are about to make that respect into a competition. Sandra nodded back. Logan sat behind the bar beside Grip and watched the room fill and felt his heart rate doing something it had no reason to be doing, since he was not testifying, was not a party to the action, in a formal legal sense, was simply a man sitting in a courtroom because a girl he'd given a coat to had asked for his testimony to be part of something larger. But bodies don't always respond to the logic of their situation. He put his hand flat on his father's coat across his lap and took a breath. Judge Patricia Alderman entered at exactly 9 o'clock and settled herself with the efficiency of someone who considers tardiness a form of disrespect to the process. She was 60-something with reading glasses and a quality of attention that immediately established that nothing in her courtroom was going to happen without her noticing it. "I've reviewed the filings from both parties," she said without preliminary. "Ms. Hale, your emergency counter motion arrived at 7:03 this morning. Ms. Okafor, your response arrived at 7:47. She looked at both of them. "I want to say clearly at the outset that the pace of this proceeding is a signal to me that both parties believe the stakes are significant. I agree. We'll proceed accordingly." She looked at her notes. "Ms. Hale, your motion argues procedural impropriety in the original filing. You have 15 minutes. Christine Hale stood. She was precise and structured and made her argument with the architectural clarity of someone who had built it carefully, that Sandra's filing represented an overreach, that the documentation of pattern of conduct was based on selective interpretation of legitimate financial practice, that the protective order request was disproportionate and designed to generate publicity rather than protection. She was good. Logan watched the judge while Hale spoke, looking for the response, the micro-adjustments that would tell him something. Judge Alderman listened with her hands folded and her face professionally neutral. Then Sandra stood. She didn't begin with the letters. That was the first thing Logan noticed. She led with the cell tower data and the courthouse access log and the fact of his cloned maintenance credentials, and she connected it to the threatening text, and she walked the judge through the timeline with the same efficiency she brought to everything. And when she finished that section, she paused for exactly one beat, the pause of someone who knows what comes next, will change the room, and said, "Your Honor, I'd also like to present 3 letters produced this morning that establish pre-transfer contact between Slade Financial Holdings and the debtor in question beginning approximately 4 months before the formal transfer notification." She set the folder on the plaintiff's table. Dale walked copies to the clerk. Copies went to Christine Hale. Logan watched Hale's face when she read the first letter. He watched the specific, controlled expression of a professional encountering something she did not know was in the room. It lasted less than a second. She was very good, but it was there. The slight tightening around the eyes. The almost imperceptible recalibration. Judge Alderman read the letters in silence. Then she looked up. "Ms. Hale," she said, "your client's organization was in contact with the account holder 4 months prior to the documented transfer of debt ownership." Hale was already regrouping. "Your Honor, we would need time to investigate the origin and context of these." "The letters are on your client's letterhead," Judge Alderman said. "Not unkindly, precisely. They reference the account by number. They are signed by a named representative of Slade Financial Holdings." She set them down. "I'm going to set aside your counter motion. The protective order is granted pending full review." She looked at both attorneys with equal steadiness. "I'm also referring the courthouse access issue to Deputy Marshal Connors, who I understand has already begun a parallel investigation." She closed the folder in front of her. "Ms. Okafor, I'd like to schedule a full evidentiary hearing within 30 days. Can your clients be ready?" "Yes, Your Honor," Sandra said, without hesitation, without visible satisfaction, though Logan could feel it from 3 rows back. "Ms. Hale," the judge said. A pause. "We'll need to consult with our client," Hale said. "Of course," Judge Alderman said. "You have 72 hours to file a response to the evidentiary hearing schedule." She stood. "We're adjourned." The room began to move. Logan sat still for a moment, processing the sequence, the way the whole thing had taken 45 minutes and had felt both faster and slower than 45 minutes, the way legal proceedings compress and expand time in a way that is specific to the experience of having something important happen in a formal language you're not fluent in. Grip put a hand on his shoulder briefly, said nothing, removed it. That was enough. Sandra came through the bar and sat beside Logan and said, "The protective order is the foundation. Everything else builds from here. The evidentiary hearing is where we lay the full case." She looked at him directly. "Slade is going to evaluate his position in the next 72 hours and decide whether to fight or negotiate. Given what just happened, I believe he negotiates. And if he doesn't, then we go to the full hearing," Sandra said. "And Chloe testifies, and Dale puts 2 years of your mother's payment history on record, and we show the judge the 47 documented cases in this county, and we let the picture speak." She paused. "Either way, Logan, this is moving forward." He nodded. He picked up his father's coat and stood up and walked out of the courtroom and into the corridor where Grip's 2 men were waiting, and all of them stood there for a moment in the specific silence of people who have just watched something significant happen and are still taking its dimensions. Then Logan's phone rang, unknown number. He looked at Sandra. "Answer it," she said. He answered. The voice was different from the midnight text caller. Older, smoother. The kind of voice that had spent decades being the most important one in every room it entered and had learned to calibrate itself accordingly. "Mr. Carter," the voice said, "my name is Corbin Slade. I'd like to have a conversation." The corridor went very still. Logan looked at Sandra. She was already nodding slow, deliberate, her recorder already out. "I'm listening," Logan said. "I want you to know that I believe this situation has been mismanaged," Slade said, "by people acting on my behalf but without my full authorization. I'm calling to tell you directly that I intend to correct that." "By correct it, what do you mean?" Logan said. His voice was even. He was surprised by how even it was. "Your mother's debt," Slade said. "The full balance. I'm prepared to discharge it today, all of it. No conditions, no reporting implications. A clean discharge with documentation." A pause. "And I'd like to have a conversation about the other matters. The courthouse issued the text message that I believe were actions taken without my knowledge by people who will no longer be working for me." Logan let a silence sit. Then he said, "Is that what you're calling it?" A pause on Slade's end, the pause of a man recalibrating. "Mr. Carter, my attorney is present," Logan said. "She's heard this conversation. I'm going to hand the phone to her now." He held it out to Sandra. She took it. She listened for 20 seconds. She said, "Mr. Slade, any offers of settlement need to be made in writing through legal counsel to my office. This call is being recorded. Good morning." She ended it. She handed the phone back to Logan. She looked at him, then she looked at Grip. "He's going to settle," she said. Grip's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes. "How much everything," Sandra said. "The question is whether we let him define what everything means or whether we define it for him." "We define it," Grip said. "Yes," Sandra agreed. "We do." The settlement negotiations took 11 days. Logan wasn't in the room for most of them. That was Sandra and Dale's territory, and they occupied it with the focused, unhurried thoroughness of people who understood that the details were where the real work happened. Logan went back to his life as much as his life was available to go back to. He called in the maintenance job permanently because Deputy Marshal Connors had made it clear that the courthouse situation was under active investigation, and Logan's presence there was complicated, and he picked up extra shifts at the salvage yard instead because the body needed something to do while the mind was doing the waiting that felt like nothing but was actually everything. His mother's debt was discharged on day 4. Sandra sent him the documentation at 6 in the morning with the single text "Done. Full discharge. Clean." He read it 3 times. Then he called his mother. She answered immediately. He read her the text. She was quiet for a moment. "Logan," she said. "Yeah." "That's 2 years," she said. "That's 2 years of—" She stopped. He heard her breathe. "I want to be angry. I am angry. But right now I mostly feel like I've been putting a stone down that I carried so long I forgot it wasn't just part of me." "I know," he said. "Your father would have hated this," she said. "The whole thing. The scheme, the manipulation, all of it. He would have been furious." A pause. "But he would have loved what you did. Finding that girl, giving her the coat." Her voice was steady and warm and held all 34 years of knowing him in it. "He would have been so proud, Logan." He didn't trust his voice for a moment. "I know," he said finally. On day 7, Sandra called to tell him that the 47 other documented cases were being consolidated into a class action, that Slade's attorneys had stopped arguing about the scope of liability and started arguing about the amount, which was a significant distinction, and that Deputy Marshal Connors had made 2 arrests related to the courthouse access. One of which was, as Grip had suspected, a county officer whose name Logan recognized from 8 months of maintenance shifts and small talk conversations in hallways he'd walked 100 times without knowing what was walking alongside him. On day 9, Chloe called him. Not from the hospital she'd been discharged 2 days earlier to the secured location where Elena was already staying. She called from what sounded like a kitchen with background noise that was domestic and ordinary, and her voice had the quality of someone who has been in a very confined situation and is only beginning to recalibrate to the larger world. "I heard about the settlement," she said. "How'd you hear?" "Dad tells me everything eventually. It just takes him a while to decide how to say it." A pause. "I also heard about the class action, the 47 people." "Yeah, that was always going to be the most important part," she said. "Not us specifically, the 47. She paused. "I'm glad I'm going to testify, even if the settlement means it's for the class action hearing instead of ours specifically." "You still want to?" "More than before," she said, "because now I know who I'm testifying for. Not just myself, not just Mom." Another pause. 47 people who paid a leash and called it a payment plan. "Yeah, I want to testify." Logan sat with that for a moment. "How's your foot?" he said. A beat of silence, the kind that holds something honest. "I walked across the kitchen this morning," she said, "without holding on to anything." Her voice was careful and precise, and underneath the precision was something that cost her to say plainly. It felt different. It's going to feel different from now on. "But I walked across it." She paused. "I'm choosing to call that something." "It is something," Logan said. "Yeah," she said. "I know." On day 11, Sandra called at 2 in the afternoon. "Settlement signed," she said. "Full discharge of all documented debt across all 47 cases. Restitution payments, we got 78 cents on the dollar for total payments made post-transfer across all plaintiffs. Slade Financial Holdings is dissolving the 3 LLCs, and there's a consent decree that bars Slade personally from acquiring medical debt in Montana for 15 years. Logan was quiet. "Logan?" "Yeah, sorry, I'm here." "There's one more thing," Sandra said, and her voice had shifted into something that was harder to categorize, still professional, but with an additional quality like she was holding something carefully because it was fragile or significant, or both. Grip asked me to include something in the settlement terms that wasn't strictly necessary legally, but he insisted. What? Pioneer Garage, Sandra said. It's a shop in town, has been operating for about 12 years under a trust connected to Grip's organization. It's a legitimate business, good reputation, profitable. The settlement includes a transfer of ownership. Logan said, to who? A pause. To you, Sandra said. He heard the words. He understood them individually. They took a moment to assemble into their full meaning. Sandra. He said it wasn't negotiable, she said. I told him it was unusual to include a property transfer in a civil settlement, already a separate condition. He said, and I'm quoting him exactly, I'm not paying a debt to the court. I'm paying a debt to a person. Those are different things. She paused. The paperwork is already drawn. It just needs your signature. Logan was standing in his kitchen. His father's coat was on the chair beside him. The prescription on the counter had been filled. He'd filled it 4 days ago with money he actually had for the first time in a long time. And the relief of that small, specific thing had been quieter and more significant than he'd expected. He looked at the coat. He thought about a man who said, we don't forget debts, we erase them. He thought about Chloe walking across a kitchen without holding on to anything and choosing to call it something. He thought about his mother's hands opening on the table. He thought about his father and the coat and 30 years of wearing it in weather that should have discouraged a person from getting out of bed, and the way it smelled like motor oil and wood smoke, and the specific, irreplaceable quality of a man who taught his son to walk toward the sound. Tell Grip yes, Logan said. I'll let him know, Sandra said. Congratulations, Logan, you own a garage. He set the phone down. He sat for a moment with the full weight of the past 3 weeks. Not the events specifically, but the shape of them. The way one decision made in the dark had moved through the world like a stone dropped in still water circles, expanding outward until they reached people and situations and histories that the stone thrower never knew existed. He hadn't set out to start anything. He just stopped walking. He'd heard something in the dark. He'd turned toward it instead of away from it. He'd given a girl a coat that smelled like his father and $11 that were supposed to buy his mother's medicine. And he'd walked into the cold in a flannel shirt and trusted that he'd figure it out. He'd figured it out, figured it. Or more accurately, he'd been figured out by a situation that had somehow assembled itself around the kind of person he was and found him equal to what it needed. 3 weeks after the settlement signed, Logan walked into Pioneer Garage for the first time as its owner. He stood in the middle of it, the lifts, the tools, the smell of oil and metal, and work that had been done there for 12 years, and he stood very still for a moment, the way his father used to stand very still in spaces that meant something, just taking the measure of them. Grip was there. He'd come alone, no riders, no cut, just a man in a jacket standing in a garage watching Logan take it in. You know how to run a shop, Grip asked. I know how to fix things, Logan said. The business part I'll learn. You'll figure it out, Grip said. That seems to be what you do. Logan turned to look at him. You didn't have to do this. No, Grip agreed. But I didn't. I did it because I wanted to, because it was right. He looked at Logan with those steady eyes. You didn't just save my daughter. You reminded me what it looks like when a person acts from their actual character instead of their calculation. No angle, no strategy, just who you are in a moment that costs something. He paused. That's worth more than a garage, but a garage is what I have. Logan looked at the space around him, the tools, the lifts, the work waiting to be done. Before you left my kitchen, Logan said, that first day, you said my father would have done the same thing. Yeah, Grip said. I've been thinking about that. Logan paused. I think you're right, and I think part of why I stopped in that alley was him. Not consciously, but the part of me that stopped walking was the part he built. Grip was quiet for a moment. Good fathers, he said, don't really leave. They just go where you can't see them and keep working. Logan looked at his father's coat hanging on the hook by the door, the first thing he'd hung, when he walked in, the way his father had always hung his coat first thing in any space where he was going to do serious work. Yeah, Logan said, I know. A month later, Chloe Reynolds walked into Pioneer Garage on a Thursday afternoon. She walked differently than she had before. Everyone who knew what had happened could see it, the slight adaptation in her gait, the way her weight distributed differently on the left side. But she walked in without holding on to anything, and she walked straight to the front counter, where Logan was reviewing an invoice, and she set her hands flat on the counter and looked at him with those precise, fully focused eyes. "I testified yesterday," she said. "Class action evidentiary hearing, 2 hours and 14 minutes. I remembered everything." "I know," Logan said. "Sandra told me. I wanted to tell you myself," she paused. "I wanted you to hear it from me, that I did it, that I was okay." She looked at him steadily, and that the judge, when I finished, said she wanted to note for the record that the witness demonstrated exceptional clarity and composure. Chloe said it plainly without performance, just the fact of it. "I thought you'd want to know that." "I did want to know that," Logan said. She looked around the garage, at the coats on the hook, at the tools on the walls, at the lifts, in the work bays, and the smell of a place where things got fixed. "Is the coat there yours?" she said. "Yeah." The same one, the same one." She looked at it for a moment, then she looked back at Logan. "I'm going to come back here," she said. "When I finish school, I want to learn how engines work." She said it the way she said everything, directly, without apology, with the specific precision of a person who has already decided and is simply informing you of the decision. "Is that okay?" Logan looked at her, at the girl who had asked him not to call anyone, who had remembered 2 years of fear in exact detail, who had walked across a kitchen without holding on and called it something. "Yeah," he said, "that's okay." She nodded once. She turned and walked to the door. She pulled it open. The Montana cold came in for a moment, clean and sharp and entirely indifferent to everything that had happened in it. Then she paused in the doorway. "Logan," she said without turning around. "Yeah." "Thank you for stopping," she said. The door closed behind her. Logan stood at the front counter of Pioneer Garage and looked at his father's coat on the hook by the door and thought about a night on Route 9 when a truck died and a man walked 4 miles in the cold and almost didn't stop and then stopped, and how that single moment, that hinge point in the dark, had moved through 3 weeks and 3 families and 47 lives in a federal courthouse, in a settlement signed on day 11, in a garage with his name on the deed. He thought about what Grip had said at his kitchen table the very first morning. "We don't forget debts. We erase them." Some debts, Logan understood now, could not be settled in money or property or legal filings. Some debts lived in the specific gravity of a moment, in the weight of a coat, given away in $11 pressed into frozen hands, in the choice to turn into the dark instead of walking past it. Those debts didn't get erased. They got carried forward, passed on, paid into the world in the only currency that actually meant anything in the next person who stopped walking and turned toward the sound and gave whatever they had. Logan Carter put on his father's coat because it was cold and because it was his, and he walked to the first lift and started working. That was enough. That was everything. That was exactly what honor looks like when it's living in the real world, doing ordinary things, asking nothing in return.